In this video, we are solving trig equations, and the idea for this video is that sometimes we can factor to find solutions, okay? And this problem says, find all values of theta in the interval 0 is less than or equal to theta is less than 2 pi. So notice that here we're working with radians, right? Because it's going from 0 to 2 pi. That's like 0 to 360. And these are all the values that are in this interval for which 2 times the sine of theta minus 1 is equal to 3 over the sine of theta. Okay, well, I'm just going to bring this down here so that we have a little more room. So this is 2 times the sine of theta minus 1 is equal to 3 over the sine of theta. I don't like this sine of theta down here in the denominator, and I'm going to do something to get rid of it. Let's use clearing the fraction. What do we have to multiply 3 over the sine of theta by in order to make that sine of theta go away? Yes, we multiply by the sine of theta. So on both sides, I'm going to multiply by the sine of theta. So this is the sine of theta times 2 sine theta minus 1. The quantity of it is equal to, I'm writing it all out so that you can see exactly what I'm doing, the sine of theta times 3 over the sine of theta. Now we'll simplify. The sine of theta times 2 sine of theta becomes 2 sine squared theta, sine times sine is sine squared, minus the sine of theta times 1 is sine theta, and this equals, here we have the sine of theta times 3 over the sine of theta. This sine of theta is on top, this sine of theta is down below. They cancel out. We end up with just 3. That is the way it's supposed to work when you use clearing the fraction. Take a look at this, what we have right now. Well, we now have a situation where we have all the same function. It's all very nice. Let's go ahead, even now, let's go ahead and do a u substitution. I'm going to say that u is equal to, let's set u equal to the sine of theta. What does this look like if we replace all of the sine of thetas with u's? Well, 2 sine squared theta becomes 2u squared. Minus, instead of sine theta, let's put a u, and this is equal to 3. At this point, you should recognize this is just a quadratic equation. You've seen them many times before. The nice thing about u substitution is that, at least for a little while, we can forget about the trig and just do the algebra on the u's. So in order to solve a quadratic equation like this, it has to be equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides, and we end up with 2u squared minus u minus 3 is equal to 0. Excellent. Now, I kind of gave a hint at the beginning that sometimes we can factor to find solutions. So can this be factored? I hope it can be. Let's try to do it. Well, I don't see any greatest common factor that I can pull out of there. There isn't a u in all the terms. I'm going to try to break this into a product of 2 binomials. In order to get a 2u squared, I will have to have a 2u and a u, right? Because 2u times u gives us 2u squared. I can also see that if this is going to be a negative 3, that must mean that these two signs have to be different. When that's a negative, that means that these two signs are different. Now, whether it's a plus or a minus or a plus, that takes a little practice or maybe some trial and error. Let's try putting it down as a plus first. Let's see what that looks like. Well, these two numbers then have to multiply together to give us this. So there's not that many ways that can go. It must either be a 3 and a 1 or a 1 and a 3. Let's try putting it as a 3 and a 1 and see what happens. Now we test it to get this middle part. So this is 2u times the outside here. This would be 2u times negative 1. That's a negative 2u. And here we have 3u. So that's negative 2u plus 3u. Negative 2u plus 3u is u. That's a positive u. That's not the middle that we want. And so this is not the way to go. It's awfully close. It's off only by a sign. So this is a positive u when you add up add that up, and this is a negative u. Since it's so close but only off by a sign, I'm going to try just changing the order that we put that in. Let's try 2u plus 1 and u minus 3 and see what happens. In this case, it would be 2u times negative 3, that would be negative 6u. And 1 times u is u, so negative 6u plus u, oh, well that gives us negative 5u, and that's even farther off, so that's not going to work. Let's try another possibility. How about 2u, how about if we leave the 3 and the 1, so we don't change the order of the numbers, but we just change the sign. So that would be 2u minus 3 and u plus 1. Let's try that. In that case, then, we get 2u times 1, which is 2u. Negative 3 times u is negative 3u. 2u plus negative 3u is negative u. And that is what we have in the middle. That is what we want to get. So this is nicely factored. This is what it looks like when you factor this part. So I'm going to bring this over here. So this is the quantity 2u minus 3 times the quantity u plus 1, and this is all equal to 0. That means we have two little equations. We have 2u minus 3 equals 0, and we have u plus 1 equals 0. In this case, we can add 3 to both sides, so we get 2u is equal to 3, and then divide by 2, so u is equal to 3 halves. That's one possibility. And over here, we quickly get that u is equal to negative 1. Now that we have solved for u, we go back and we see, what was that u filling in for? Aha, yes, it's time to bring back the trig. So we'll bring back that trig. Down here, instead of a u, we'll put the sine of theta is equal to 3 over 2. And the other possibility is that the sine of theta is equal to negative 1. This one is an interesting situation. You see, 3 over 2 is larger than 1. Is it ever possible for the sine of an angle to be larger than 1? It isn't, which means that there isn't any angle that's going to make that work. There are no solutions to this part, and so we can save the time by not looking for them. This one certainly does have solutions, and to find them, I'm going to draw a unit circle. The sine depends upon the y-axis. Look on the y-axis and find where will it be negative 1 on the y-axis? Well, that's down here, right? See, this angle that takes us around there, this has a y-coordinate of negative 1. In fact, it's the only such point. Let's see. This wants us to give the answers in radians, and so let's remind ourselves that since from there to there is pi, how far is it in radians from there to there? Well, that's half of the distance. So if this is pi, then this is pi over 2. So in radians, that's pi over 2. If this is 1 pi over 2, then this is 2 pi over 2. And then this is 3 pi over 2. And so all the way from there to there, that is an angle of 3 pi over 2. And so we find that theta equals 3 pi over 2 is the angle, so that the sine, right? Because what are the coordinates of this point? The coordinates of this point are 0, negative 1. That 0 is the cosine, and that negative 1 is the sine. So the sine of 3 pi over 2 equals negative 1, and there we have our final answer.